All right, hi everyone, welcome back. Today, in my continued journey to use up all of this Miya Himi Gouache, I'm gonna be getting back in my sketchbook and I'm gonna be painting some Studio Ghibli scenes today. I've only done one other Studio Ghibli scene and I did it in this watercolor sketchbook, but it was a really complicated scene and I was very new to gouache. And so I really feel like it was just kind of a difficult scene to paint in general. To start off, I'm going to be doing The Secret World of Arrietty. I love this movie. It has so many cool scenes. I'm going to get busy painting some of these scenes. And yeah, I'm just going to go. I'm just going to get started.
Okay, so when I started out with this video's intro, I forgot to mention this is part 7 in a series that I'm doing where I'm trying to use up all of this 24 set of Miya Himi Jelly Gouache, and I do have a playlist of all of the previous videos in this series if you want to go back and watch those. I'll link it in this video's description. I also have all my favorite art supplies listed in my description box along with my Instagram, just if you're curious. Anyway, this has been a really great way to actually use up this art supply. Most of the paintings that I do in my gouache sketchbook are mostly just for fun. There's not a lot of pressure involved in it. One of the first things that I really wanted to paint with this gouache was a Studio Ghibli scene. There are a lot of good reasons to do scene studies when you're learning how to paint, and I think there's just something about gouache and Studio Ghibli scenes. It's like peanut butter and jelly. Because if you've ever seen a Studio Ghibli movie, the colors that they use and the overall finish that the animation has is very similar to the finish that gouache gives. And if you're like me and you don't like painting people, there are plenty of scenes where the characters are not in them, or the scenes are just so good in themselves that you can pretty much remove the character and just paint over that spot. But I wanted to share a couple of tips though if you're trying to do a scene study that I find helpful, and hopefully it will help you if you're trying it for the first time. And one of those tips is when you're first starting out and you have your scene all laid out, take a look at the overall colors in different areas. And when you're blocking out certain sections, because you kind of need a really light undercoat when you're using gouache. So when you're doing that first light layer and you're blocking out big shapes, try to pay attention to what the overall color in that area is. So for instance, in the background, if it might be trees and greenery and stuff, but if it has a kind of a blue tint to it, then I would suggest painting that section with a light blue color. That way when you go over top of it, it already has that kind of blue tint to it. And of course you can mix those colors later on, but it just kind of makes it a little bit easier when you have that tone already there to paint on top of. And the more I've been using gouache, the more I have really noticed that this helps a lot. Even if you're not painting a scene, if you're just painting something that you know is going to have like a yellow look to it, if you paint that background with a really light wash of yellow, then it just really helps overall when you go to layer on top of it. Because another tip that I have is the more you layer, the better it looks. And I don't mean to go in with like thick layers, because that can get you into trouble when you're using gouache, because if the layers are too thick and it's not your very last layer, then when you go on top of that thick layer, it's like a blending nightmare. It is the worst thing. And at that point, you have to like pretty much just scrape it all off and start over. At least for me. At least I've found that. So it's a lot like watercolor in the sense that you want to increase the darkness as you go and do really light layers to darken it up. Something I really struggled with when I first started with gouache is I wanted to be able to put down a mark and it be perfect and not have to go back over top of it. But most of the time in the first layers, you really do have to go over top of it before you can do that final mark on top, which is really hard for me because I'm an acrylic painter. And so with acrylic, you can literally just paint over and paint over. It doesn't matter because once it dries, it doesn't move around. But since the gouache is so mixable, you really want to do as thin a layer as you can without it being too watery. Because if you use too much water, then it definitely mixes too much also. So there's a real happy medium in there, and you just have to keep practicing with it to really understand the ratios of everything and how to not make such a mess out of your work, which I still have a hard time with. But I will just say it is helpful to know that the first layers are gonna look bad. This is still true to this day. If anyone has seen my review for Himi Gouache, that is something that has remained true to this day, which is you have to get over how it looks in the beginning. It's gonna look bad. It is the epitome of trust the process and don't give up, which is actually another tip that I have. Don't give up. Keep going. It's so funny because I really enjoyed doing these scene studies, and I think that the results on both of them actually turned out really well. There's obviously some quirkiness that's kind of, imperfect, which is totally fine. I wasn't trying to get super realistic with it. I really enjoyed both of them, but at the same time, with both of them, as soon as I started painting, I had the same exact thought both times, which is, this is going to be really challenging. This is not going to look anything like what I want it to. And really just like digging deep and just hoping that it turns out well, because honestly, like up until halfway through the painting, it just looks bad. There's no polite way to say it. It just looks bad. It's streaky, the colors are all wrong, and it just looks like a mess. And it feels like a mess when you're painting it. But the good thing is it dries quickly. You can keep going and keep layering on top, and the more you go and the more you layer, the better it looks. Now, another tip that I have that I did not do in the first study that I corrected and did in the second study was drawing an outline, which I really kind of hate doing because I'm not very good with drawing in general, and it's a little discouraging for me when I'm trying to draw something and I just can't get it to look right. And usually I end up spending way too much time trying to get it perfect instead of just thinking in that mindset of like, I just need to know where the placement should go. So it's like, if you're good at drawing, you can draw and draw it perfectly and draw every little detail if you really want to, because I think the more you put into it and the more you have it looking just right, the easier it will be once you go back on top of it and paint it. So if you're great at drawing, go for it. Know where everything is going to be placed, because it really will help in the long run. But if you're like me at all and you hate drawing, you're not good at sketching, just worry about the overall placement of things. So if you have something that's a little off-center, like a house, then just draw the borders of that house and block it in very loosely so you just know like, hey, this needs to be in this area and it can't go past this point. Same thing with like little objects. If you have windows on a house and you have to get 3 of them in this big area, it's a lot easier to kind of mark loosely where those should be. Not necessarily get the exact square shape or the exact rectangle or whatever shape the window or object is, but just knowing where to place that helps a lot when you go back on top of it and you're painting. It's one less thing to worry about. It's very helpful. And you'll see I do that in my second painting because I really wanted to place the character in the right spot. And also because the character is like in and amongst a lot of like shrubs and bushes, I really needed to make sure that those bushes had enough space for themselves because some of them are in front, some of them are in back. And so blocking all of those things out, I think really helped a lot. And honestly, I think both of these turned out really well. Let me know your opinion on them. I was not trying to get them like 100% perfect or anything, but I felt like I did a good job on like the colors and just being able to use the gouache, because like I said, I'm terrible at gouache. I feel like I'm always going to be terrible at gouache. I have gotten better at it though. I will say I have gotten better at it the more that I've used it. I know a lot of people have been telling me that I need to try a better quality gouache, and I probably will eventually use a better quality gouache. I'm really waiting until this challenge is over, because if I start using a better quality, then it's probably going to make me hate this gouache even more. And I really don't want to waste this paint. It definitely it challenges you to use something that you're not super comfortable using. And I think that can be a good thing. So I'm going to keep using this gouache until it's completely gone. And if you want to join me on that journey, you can click subscribe. If you've enjoyed this challenge so far, please hit the like button. Let me know if you have any ideas for me to paint. I've gotten a lot of good suggestions of what to paint. So thank you to everyone who has left comments on what I should paint next. I appreciate it. And if I haven't done your suggestion yet, I'm positive that I will eventually do all of the suggestions. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed watching me paint these studies. Please let me know which one was your favorite. Also, what's your favorite Studio Ghibli movie? I don't know. Picking a favorite might be hard to do. Let me know. If it's easy for you to pick a favorite, let me know in the comments. Anyways, that's all for this video, and I'll see y'all next time.